stay in my outfit. What I'm gonna do if I really want to, but you know, baby, break my mind in two. But you have the key, so open my heart, please, my heart, please. Tell me that I'm beautiful till counterparts, but I like to hide. I'm more what you got, I'm more what you got.
Monica, it's so cool to be here during Climate Week New York.
It's so great. It's so exciting. I have never done anything like this before.
Honestly, me neither. And I'm a big fan of karaoke, car karaoke.
James Corden.
Yes.
I think I've watched them all.
So maybe we should try and imitate that a little bit.
Can you sing?
No, can you sing?
Only in the shower.
Monica, this is so cool. We're in the back of this BMW.
Sweet ride.
Yeah, sweet ride. I think let's get rolling. But it looks like we're about to roll right into some traffic.
It's New York. We should expect this.
It's New York, and it's Climate Week New York, and it's the United Nations General Assembly. The fact that we're moving at all is impressive to me.
It is always a little bit chaotic here. And then just driving in this city, because I'm sure that the views in a car like this are great because there are people coming at you from every angle, whether it's pedestrians and just to be able to hear them. We were talking about how quiet this car is when we got in. To be able to hear them makes a huge difference because, it's hard with so many things coming at you in the city to drive and be as aware of things as you need to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, great.
Well, I'm hoping that this might be maybe my next purchase, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we start talking about how much we love this ride, let's experience the ride a little bit. Let's chat. I would love for those tuning in to learn a little bit more about you because you to me are now my friend Monica, my colleague Monica, but to everyone else, you are the Monica Medina.
Oh, that's too nice. No.
You have had an incredible career in public service. Mm-hmm. Let's start at the beginning. What brought you into, what inspired the career trajectory that you've been on? Where do you still plan to go? But let's start with what inspired you to begin in the first place.
Well, it gets back to my kids. I'm a lawyer by training, and I have spent a lot of my career in government, but I've spent a lot of it out of government too. I've kind of done a little bit of everything, which has been an interesting ride. It has not been a straight and narrow path.
It's a
winding road, but it started because my daughter, who's now about to have a baby herself, so I'm about to be a grandmother and thinking about, can you fit a car seat in the back? And you can. My daughter had asthma, and I lived in the city, and I was really struck by how many other kids were sort of popping up with asthma. She also has terrible nut allergies, and there weren't many kids with that at the time, but now it's the kind of thing that people experience a lot more. It made me wonder why. What is it about our environment? What could it be that's triggering this? It's not just a genetic thing or a family trait. Sure. She had serious asthma, and we had to do breathing treatments 3 times a day, and there were times where I worried that she wouldn't be able to catch her breath, and it made me think about what could I do? So I started to work on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee staff, and I did Clean Air Act work, and it was right after the Clean Air Act amendments in 1990 had passed. And so we were trying to make sure that the law got fully implemented. It was also the early years of the Clinton administration. And so as a Democratic administration, we were really interested in making this law as effective as possible. And we had great partners on the Republican side, a senator named Chafee, who had helped pass the law, and his staff were very involved, and we did a lot of oversight. And it was fascinating to learn how many other families and how many other kids struggled to breathe. And that's where my journey started. And it took me all kinds of places. I've done work both domestically and internationally now. I ended my last job in the government, was in the Biden administration as the Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, Environment, and Science. And that gave me an opportunity to work with Special Presidential Envoy Kerry, Secretary Kerry. I like to say I sang backup for him because wherever he couldn't go, they would send me. And he had a lot of requests, so
he was backup for you in
No,
this part
I'm gonna
when it comes to it.
But I also did a lot of work on ocean conservation, on global plastic pollution, on marine and biodiversity in general. There's another conference of the parties that's all about biodiversity and conserving biodiversity, which is also under tremendous threat.
Sure.
So anyway, I had a wonderful opportunity to work internationally and to see how the things that we do in America, like all of our greenhouse gas pollution, really impacts the rest of the world. And when we passed the big climate bills, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I could see that other countries finally saw us, the second largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, saw us as really doing our part to make the world a better place.
Right, like actually walk the talk.
Yes.
And so that's what happened with the Biden administration while you were in it.
Yes.
And you have a special spot in your heart for conservation. So this started, I didn't know the family link to this and the health link to this. So thank you for sharing that. That's deeply personal. When I met you most recently, in your role in the Biden administration, conservation was really
Yes.
in your heart. So tell me a little bit about why that's so special to you.
Well, two things. I mean, I was lucky enough in the Biden administration to be the first special presidential envoy, or special envoy, sorry, I shouldn't say presidential. Only Secretary Kerry got to be a presidential envoy, but a special envoy at the State Department for nature, biodiversity, and water resources. So it was really a wonderful thing that our government did to say, hey, we care about not just climate change, but about this big challenge with biodiversity loss. And it gave me an opportunity to represent our country in a lot of meetings where countries are not greenhouse gas emitters. They take a lot of the stress from extreme weather events, and a lot of the climate harms happen to them, but they're biodiverse, rich countries. So they really care about also conserving what they consider to be their wealth, their biodiversity. Sure. So that was tremendous. And at home, I worked on, when I was in the Clinton administration, one of the most interesting and challenging but really satisfying things I worked on was something called the Headwaters Forest, which is these 1,000-year-old redwood trees in California that were about to be all cut down. And this very brave and really determined activist named Julia Butterfly climbed up into the top of one of these trees and would not come down until the government struck a deal with an industrialist who owned this grove, and he kept threatening to cut them all down until the government would exchange some of his debts to the government for the trees. So we kind of did a debt for nature sort of swap for the trees, and Julia Butterfly came down. And it was, and interestingly, this is the funniest thing of all, and I'll do a small promo for this.
No, please.
There's a new Broadway show that was actually inspired by this whole incident. It's called Redwood.
Okay.
Idina Menzel, it's opening
Now
in
she can
January.
sing.
Now she can sing. Get her in the back of this car.
Right.
But anyway, it was a really inspiring thing to think about these 1,000-year-old trees, how long they had been there, how much biodiversity they hosted, how cathedral-like they are. You just can't be among them and not think, we have to protect them.
Right.
And so it was really inspiring to work on that. I also worked on buying out a gold mine that was trying to get built next to Yellowstone National Park that could have threatened those resources. So all of a sudden I thought about, not just pollution, but also about the natural world and how inspiring it is for people, and then during the pandemic, it was just amazing to see how many people reconnected with nature when they had time, or when they had the space to look out their window at home and see the birds, or enjoy the blue sky because it was less air pollution. So
we're gonna be able to usher in that future if we get it right. If IRA is disseminated as intended, and if we electrify transportation, and here we are in this electric car driving around. So talk to us a little bit about where you see the success of IRA going, especially as it relates to transport.
Well, there's just so many opportunities, whether it's to electrify school buses or other kinds of public transport, or to promote more walking and other forms of transportation entirely, like electric bikes or scooters. I know that they're a little bit distracting when you're driving, but our roads are very crowded right now. And the more that we can take some of that pressure off, the better. And there was a study just recently that Americans are driving more than ever. And so we really need these kinds of cars that will improve our air quality, lower costs because we won't be paying for gasoline, and also, you know, it's innovation. It's the way we're going to keep ourselves from having such a big footprint on the planet.
I love the idea of not having to go to a gas station, but then I also get nervous. It's that whole range anxiety thing. I get nervous that my car is not going to make it from point A to point B.
Yep.
But we're solving that, it seems like. That's not going to be an issue that lasts forever.
We are. One of the big things that the bill does is help build out that electrification network, that charging station network. And I think it just takes time. You know, most of these changes that we're trying to make, they're not like flipping a switch. They're more like turning a dial. So little by little, we're going to be able to make those changes happen. And people will get more accustomed to riding around in a car like this one and knowing when they need to stop. And it will be more convenient because it'll be at places like the grocery store or in your office parking lot. Or, you know, I think increasingly people will share cars more too. Right. So anyway,
we'll get used to it.
Really interesting how changes will happen. You know all about behavioral change.
This is the part of the conversation that always gets me excited because we are more comfortable with what we know, what's familiar. And so oil-fueled cars have been the default. And so therefore, it's what we are uncomfortable with thinking. We're just uncomfortable with change. But when these cars become more ubiquitous, we're going to forget that we're not going to believe that we ever were accepting of oil cars.
Right. Someday people will think of these as like horses and buggies, right?
Exactly. So that's a future I'm excited about.
Not these cars. I mean, the cars around us.
Okay, so we've been talking about pollution, we've been talking about transportation, we've been talking about nature. How does this fit into the kind of bigger climate conversation? It's all connected, obviously, but how do you think about as somebody who has who's been able to prioritize in the U.S. government where to send attention and time and resources? How do you think about prioritizing where you would make the most impact with climate?
Well, I think the interesting thing about this administration, I'm really fortunate to have served in it, is that they thought about taking a whole of government approach. Not only could they figure out how can the government lower its carbon footprint, its plastic footprint. They're doing all kinds of things to reduce the amount of plastic that the government uses and disposes of. So the government's thinking a lot more along the lines of how do we lower our carbon footprint, our waste footprint. But in addition, it's thinking about these policies when it comes to housing or when it comes to agriculture. We've only just scratched the surface of all that we can do, and some of the most innovative and interesting things that will happen with these new laws is that some of the way that we think about farming will change. Our food will be just as good, but we'll use less water to grow it, or we'll need fewer pesticides or fewer fertilizers because of the way they're changing soil practices. There's another COP this year. Most people think about the climate COP, but there's another COP this year that's on desertification and land degradation. And it is just as important. It really matters in a lot of places where droughts are really, people are suffering because they don't have enough food to eat. And so thinking about the 3 COPs this year, there's so much opportunity: ag, energy, transportation, and industrial processes. It's a massive year. Again, another one.
And these are global conversations, and the Biden administration, and while you were part of the Biden administration, was really picking America's role back up as the leader in accelerating the transition to clean energy across all sectors. And I imagine you're hopeful that this will continue.
Oh, I think that, you know, we are on the right path. We are on the road to the future, and we can't get off.
I love the puns. We've had so many puns.
I know.
Or rather, you have, and I get to pick up on them. That was great. We are on the road to the future.
We are on the road to the future, and we are going to keep going straight ahead. And I know that American ingenuity and our you know, cars like this give people hope. They make people see that there are things that we can do, both together and as individuals, to make this planet a more livable place for our kids and our grandkids.
Yes, new grandmother. Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
riding with me.
Thank you,
I'm
Sweta.
glad
This was
We
great.
probably spared everyone listening right now by not singing. So.
I know. All right.
That was not a bad decision.
Off we go.
Off we go.
I can't stay in my fit. What I'm gonna do if I really want to?